A $400 million all-you-can-eat blunder, a $30 million maintenance error, 24 bolts that cost $135 million, and a $50 million calibration error 50 times smaller than a human hair. All this and more in the most expensive mistakes in history.
Brilliant news!
Number 1. Nanfang'ao Bridge. On October 1st, 2019, a catastrophe struck this bridge in Taiwan. Just as this oil tanker crossed over the 460-foot bridge, it collapsed. The tanker and 3 fishing boats were destroyed, and around 500 other boats were trapped in the harbour until the bridge was removed. An inquiry into how the disaster happened discovered that water had been leaking into the bridge's anchoring system and had rusted out the steel support cables. Some of these cables only had 20% of their original strength left. This corrosion had failed to be detected by the people responsible for the bridge's maintenance, because no maintenance had been carried out on the bridge for over 4 years. The mistake cost the government $130,000 in compensation and nearly $30 million for a new bridge. Number 2. Red Lobster. The Red Lobster restaurant chain knows that Americans love snow crab, so they tried to capitalize on it. They worked out that they could offer an all-you-can-eat crab offer for just $22.99 and make massive profits. However, they calculated that the average person would eat 2 plates of crab as well as other side dishes. But this wasn't the case. The average person ate 4 plates with no extra sides, and because crab takes a while to eat, the customers were staying at the tables longer. Add to this that the increased demand in crab had caused its price to rise, and the Red Lobster restaurant found that its profit margin had reduced. Their client turnover had reduced, and most of the clients they did have only spent $22.99. The managing miscalculation was so great that in just 3 months, Red Lobster lost $3.3 million. This caused Wall Street analysts to downgrade their stock price, causing the Red Lobster company's value to drop by $400 million. Number 3. MV Golden Ray. The Golden Ray was a 660-foot long car carrier with a capacity for 7,400 vehicles. On September 8, 2019, after having loaded around 4,300 vehicles, the ship left Brunswick dock, and 23 minutes later it began to list, and then it capsized. The official inquiry found that the ship had begun to list whilst loading its cargo and hadn't been water ballasted correctly. Once they loaded the other side of the ship, it righted itself, but without the water ballast. Its center of gravity was now too high. As it left the dock, this lack of weight below the water level meant that as soon as it began to list, there was no way to correct it. The ship and its cargo were declared a complete loss, and salvage of the ship started. The losses were an estimated $70 million for the ship and $80 million for the cargo. But the most costly part has been the salvage, because a special heavy lift vessel called a VB-10,000 was required to cut sections of the ship and lift them onto barges to take them away. The total cost of the disaster has escalated to nearly $800 million. Number 4. NOAA-19 satellite. The NOAA-19 was due to be the last on the American National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration series of satellites and was being manufactured by Lockheed Martin Space Systems in California. The satellite required the installation of a lot of delicate and expensive instruments and sensors. In the final stages of construction, the technicians were rotating it from a vertical position to a horizontal position when the $233 million satellite fell off the turnover cart and smashed onto the ground. After an official inquiry, it was discovered that a technician had removed the 24 bolts that secured the satellite to the cart and had failed to document that they had done so. The technicians working on the satellite had also failed to check that the satellite was properly secured to the cart, and when the satellite had reached a pitch of 13 degrees, it had tipped up and fallen. The repair bill for this mistake was an astonishing $135 million. Lockheed forfeited their profits and ended up fronting $30 million, and the rest was paid by the US government. Number 5. Hubble Space Telescope. In April 1990, the Hubble telescope was successfully launched into space. However, NASA found that all the images they received from their $1.5 billion satellite were blurry. After an investigation, NASA found that the primary lens of the telescope had been polished to the wrong shape, and the outer perimeter was too flat. It was found that an error in calibration meant the outer perimeter hadn't been polished enough and was 2,200 nanometers, 1/450th of a millimeter, 1/50th the thickness of a human hair, too flat. NASA couldn't repolish the lens now that it was in space, so they had to come up with a different solution. They ended up with the idea of basically building another lens to put over the top of the wrong shaped one, correcting the error. Kind of like a contact lens corrects our vision. This lens cost $50 million to make and install and was called the Corrective Optics Space Telescope Axial Replacement, or COSTAR, although a better name for the fix would have been Big Adjustment Needed Didn't Allow for Idiots device. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made? Comment below.